Welcome to the Online Business Era podcast. Interviews with successful and up-and-coming online entrepreneurs gives you an in-depth look at what it takes to have a powerful online business and brand. Grab a pen and get ready to take notes from entrepreneurs that share their powerful advice with you today. Hello again, everybody. This is Joseph Kiss from OnlineBusinessEra.com. You are listening to episode number 5 of the Online Business Era podcast today, and I've got a very special guest. Now, before we talk about who that is and before we get to the interview, I just wanted to let you know that 2013 is about to wrap up. Christmas is just around the corner, and I've got some very big names in the online community lined up for 2014. So what I'm doing is, for anybody that is subscribing at OnlineBusinessEra.com, you will get an opportunity to get recorded by me asking questions to some of our future guests. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the audio for a future guest, and you'll be on the episode and you'll be asking the question from some of these masters, I guess you could say, of the online world. Now, today I have Jason Van Orden, who is the second half and business partner of Jeremy Franzen, who I interviewed in episode number 1, and they own Internet Business Mastery. So we are going to be talking about a truckload of different things, and Jason's got a lot of insight into the online business world. And he's also going to be talking about a few things that he's never shared anywhere else, and he's going to share that with us and the Online Business Era community today. So let's get to the interview and let's introduce Jason. Hey Jason, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me here. This is great.
Yeah, awesome. Pleasure's mine. Thanks for being on Online Business Era podcast. Now, Jason, you are from InternetBusinessMastery.com. And your partner is Jeremy Franzen, who I had on the first episode of Online Business Era podcast. And I asked him the same question, so I'm going to ask you the same thing. Can you tell us and tell the audience what your background is before you got into Internet Business Mastery, and maybe kind of give us an idea as to how your relationship was forged and how you got into Internet Business Mastery with Jeremy?
Yeah, sure. So prior to being an entrepreneur, I was following kind of the typical track of what people are told growing up, and that is, go to college, get a good education, and then go get a good job and something that's dependable, going to pay well, give you that weekly paycheck to raise a family and things like that. And so that's the plan that I was following. I went to college. I graduated with an electrical engineering degree, and I got a great job, one of the highest paying jobs out of my graduating class, engineers, and promptly after a nice honeymoon, because I had just gotten married, reported to my career and started what I thought was going to be my 40-year career until I retired, and then did the retirement thing, just like my parents, right? So the problem with that was that things weren't as rosy, I guess, as I don't know what I assumed adult life would be like. But one Sunday afternoon, my wife and I were sitting on the porch playing music together, as we enjoy doing, and this feeling hit me that it's kind of like a sinking feeling in my stomach and my chest. I just didn't feel good at all, and it's something I call the Sunday night dread. It was this realization that, it's probably 8 in the evening. It's like, oh, pretty soon I'm going to go to bed. Going to bed means getting up in the morning. Getting up in the morning means going to work. And the idea of going to work was just no longer appealing to me, because 8 plus hours, sometimes 12 or more, was just not feeding or fulfilling me in any way. And I was finding it hard to peel myself out of bed in the morning. And in fact, the next morning the alarm goes off and I immediately hit the snooze button. And so the alarm goes off again, snooze, on, snooze, on, snooze. And the fifth time I woke up that morning was my wife saying, is everything okay? And I'm like, I don't know. And I peel myself out of bed and head to the shower thinking, is there something, like, what is wrong with me? What's going on? Do I just need to, grow up? Why am I, so just not happy with, something needs to change. And it was, but I didn't know what. And that day at work, I shared with a friend of mine who had graduated 3 years before me from the same college, an engineer. We were microwaving our burritos there in the cafeteria at work.
Very nice.
And I just, I shared with him my feelings of how I was kind of just like not really, I just didn't feel like my time was my own. I didn't feel energized, and I felt like I just wanted to go back to school or something. And he, he's like, I get it. That's how we all feel when we graduate. Don't worry, wait a couple more years and that feeling will go away. And what I heard him say was, just wait a couple years and you'll go numb like the rest of us. And I didn't want to go numb. I wanted to wake up every morning excited and thrilled about my life and what I was doing. I didn't want to be hitting the snooze button. I didn't want to feel Sunday night dread. I really missed being at college. I loved being in college. I actually loved, even though engineering and it's not easy. Like I loved being around new people, learning new things and new opportunities all the time. I was in control of my schedule. I picked what classes I took. I decided whether or not I wanted to go to classes, and sometimes I didn't, and I still pass them. And like I was in control, and I had opportunities to teach towards the end of school, and these are all things I really missed. So I was like, how do I get those things back in my life? And that's when thinking and pondering about these things, that's when one day at work, the phone in the cubicle next to me rang. And my friend who sat in that cubicle got up and he left because I was like, somebody called him into one of the other offices. About 5 minutes later, he came back with a box in his hand, a cardboard box, and he started putting his stuff into it. And he'd just been laid off. And he was escorted out of the building. And then the phone on the other side of me rings. And that friend gets up and walks out, comes back with a box 5 minutes later. So it was very clear what was going on. They were doing what was called, what some people might call a reduction in force, layoffs, whatever, and downsizing. And so all of a sudden I started getting afraid. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do if I lose my job? What is this going to mean? And the realization came to me in that moment that it was like, what am I doing here? Like I'm supposedly clinging to this job for this security of a paycheck that comes every week, so I can feel like, I'm everything's good, money's always going to be there. But really, I have no control. I mean, look, like somebody can yank that paycheck away at any time. Somebody else is in control of my time deciding what I do. I'm giving away like these hours every day, giving away energy and fulfillment and happiness for this supposed security that's really not even there. Like, why am I doing that? And so I knew I just needed to figure something else out. And thankfully, that's when I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is all about, financial IQ and how wealth is built. And it's not really like heavy on how-to type stuff, but it was a mindset shift completely for me. And it basically showed me, look, you don't need to do the status quo. In fact, if you follow the status quo, you're likely going to end up in the same situation as everyone else, and that is in debt, a slave to your job, a slave to your paycheck. So what are you going to do about it? Like, you need to be more deliberate, and there's other things out there, investing in business, owning businesses and real estate and other, so we need to be more in control of our income is one of the big messages of that book. And so I put down that book knowing in that moment that I was unemployable. I needed to get out of my job, and that I needed to own a business. That was that was going to put me in more control. I just had no idea how, but I knew that that's what needed to happen. And so that started a journey. That started a 1-year journey of just reading everything I could get my hands on. Entrepreneur magazine, books from the library, tapes and cassettes and whatever. They were like littering the backseat of my 1988 Buick that I bought off of my grandma, that I drive and work every day, listening to this stuff, thinking, what am I going to do? And I was reading a lot of stuff about business, a lot of stuff about marketing. And at that time, I was also in a band, and that was another passion I had, and we were actually really trying to make it happen with this band. And that's where I figured out I'm good at marketing. To get people to listen to our music, I needed to know how to market it. And so what I started dabbling in was like consulting people on marketing, and I was reading a lot about real estate investing because that's what Robert Kiyosaki talked about in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And but within a year of reading that book, I did quit my job. I was starting to dabble in real estate investing. Everything wasn't like figured out. It's not like I now magically had a business. I was starting to see some success in stuff I was doing, but I just knew that the time had come. I was going to grow much faster if I got rid of the soul-sucking, energy-sucking day job, and that it was time to sink or swim. And it didn't come easily. I had to process like 9 different fears I wrote down in a journal that I was processing with my wife, and we made that decision together. But I did dive in, and I did leave the job behind, and I'm sure Jeremy talked about doing that as well. It's not necessarily the way to do it for everybody, but for me, that's what needed to happen. And so I dove right in, and real estate investing is what I did for a while, and I made money at that. It wasn't the most like fulfilling thing for me, but at least it got me out of the job at the time. And that's how I met Jeremy, is that we met through real estate investing in our associations with that. But thankfully, I kept learning, I kept exploring, and was led to other paths of making money and starting businesses. And that's where, eventually I discovered podcasting. I was doing a bunch of marketing consulting, and podcasting came along, and I saw this word come up in a newsletter, and so I immediately typed it into Google, and Google said, "Did you mean, such and such?" Because Google didn't even know what podcasting meant at the time. This had been like early 2005.
Wow, yeah.
And I found all these blogs, like really geeky blogs, talking about, oh, this is the coolest thing ever, MP3 enclosures, RSS feeds, and blah, blah, and but it was very geeky stuff. And thankfully, my engineering background, I understood what they were talking about. And so it was just like, it was like ham radio or something. It was like the early days of the geeks geeking out. And I use that word saying I'm a total geek too. But as I extrapolated forward in my mind, I'm like, this is significant. Like, things are changing for media and how people consume content online. And this is going to bring technologies, and things are converging in such a way that there's going to be, I think podcasting is going to be a significant thing. And so I made a decision. It didn't happen overnight. It actually took me 4 or 5 months to be brave enough to make this decision. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to be the foremost expert in podcasting for business that there was. And so I started studying everything I could about it and figuring it out. And that meant starting podcasts of my own. And so I did. I started a podcast about what it was like to live in New York City. That's where I lived at the time. I started a podcast about how to start a podcast. I started a podcast with Jeremy. Mm-hmm. We'd kept in touch, even though I'd moved away from Utah. We'd kept in touch, and I said, hey, have you heard this podcasting thing? He's like, no, sounds interesting. And, in all of our chats about it, we decided, hey, let's start a show. And the most logical thing was, let's start a show talking about internet business. That's what we get on the phone and talk about anyway. Let's record our conversations and hope that people get value out of hearing our journey as internet entrepreneurs. Surely people are out there just like us 3 years ago, hoping to get out of the cubicle. Let's just share our story with them in hopes that it helps them. And it took off, and it's done really, really well. And, that was 8 years ago. We're the longest running internet business podcast, and it's been quite a journey. But, we love it. We love creating new entrepreneurs and helping people find their own path through business ownership and entrepreneurship. And that's a very long answer to your question, but that's how I came to where we are today.
Jason, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I actually took a quote from another podcast that you were featured in, and the quote is, "Cubicle Escape Artist back in 2003. Now that's amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, so yep. I think your story is going to resonate with a lot of people, absolutely with a lot of people, because there are many people out there, and myself included, in the past or presently, where, you realize on Sunday night that your freedom, what we call freedom, is coming to an end. And as soon as you go to sleep, same thing for me, as soon as you go to sleep, you wake up Monday morning and you're back to almost the soul-sucking position.
Right. That's why they call it the rat race. Like a little rat racing around on the wheel and through the maze looking for his cheese.
Exactly.
Right.
So let's talk about successful people and unsuccessful people online, or people that want to get online and start a business, or even just a blog. What are some of the differences that you see in personalities between the people that actually do something and I guess the people that, talk about doing something, but they don't end up doing anything? And what are some of the things that they can actually do to help themselves and start something online?
Well, so the ones that, I mean, obviously it starts with a desire. And I think if somebody's listening to this right now, they clearly at least have a curiosity and probably a desire to find something different. And that may or may not end up being internet business, but just that desire to maybe forge their own path, their desire to do things a bit differently, not to just follow the status quo. And so that's got to be there, because without that, clearly there's not going to be that drive to do something different and figure things out. Once you have that desire, you've got to be somebody who does have curiosity and likes to learn. I think every successful entrepreneur is a lifelong learner, and they're constantly learning, and they're also very strategic about their learning and what time, because there's all kinds of ways you can learn, and all kinds of learning can also be an avoidance tactic. Because I'll tell you, when I was after I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and I dove into all that learning, and my backseat was littered with all those CDs and DVDs and magazines, and that was appropriate for a while. I needed to dive in. I didn't know which way was forward. I knew kind of what I wanted. I wanted to get out. But I didn't know exactly how to get there. So I needed to go into what I call discovery learning mode. I needed to just digest and try things on and explore in my mind. But at some point, you got to take action. So that's the next thing, is a successful entrepreneur has to be someone, a success behavior. There's two success behaviors that we talk a lot about with our students. Success behaviors being these, proven ways of behaving and thinking that lead to success. And one of them is that you take action, you take bold action, meaning that it's, sometimes it's these bold leaps like quitting your job. Not everybody needs to quit their job, but it means like doing things at times that are uncomfortable and pushing us out of our comfort zone. And you need to take fast action. The successful people I know, they learn just enough to get started, and then they get started. And so many people get trapped, and I still have to pull myself out of this, but so many people get trapped in that waiting mode of waiting for all the lights to be green, or whatever excuse you give yourself. It's like, oh, I don't know enough yet, or maybe I don't have an assurance that it's going to work out. Well, guess what? There never is an assurance it's going to work out. You just got to get going, and something happens when you take that action, when you take that first step. There's a great quote, and I don't have access to it right now, but it's a quote. I don't remember who it's by, but it's something about how the universe conspires to help you when you do take that bold action, when you move forward. And it's like, whatever that phenomenon is, like the right kinds of things start showing up, the right ideas come into your mind, the right opportunities, you meet the right people. And I think it's just because we're aware and we're moving and we have that momentum. The next thing I'd say is that you got to be consistent. You got to take consistent action. You show up every day. It doesn't mean you're taking the perfect step every day. It doesn't mean that you're the most effective every day. But every day you're showing up, figuring it out, putting something into action, even if it's a half hour every day to start your business and work on it. Do that. Make a ritual out of it. Be consistent. If it means getting up earlier in the morning, great. If it means disconnecting the cable, fine. Do that. That would be another thing. You're willing to make sacrifices. That's what brings about success in internet business too.
No, I agree. I actually told Jeremy on episode number 1 that my wife and I cut cable about 4 or 5 months ago.
Nice.
And I have to tell you, it's one of the best things I've ever done to get myself to be more productive on a daily basis. And you know what? I just wanted to talk about a quote that I heard from Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins was actually talking about one way to better yourself, and I totally, completely, 100% agree with this, and that is to read something for a minimum of 30 minutes a day. And I've actually been doing that since I heard him say that. And it doesn't have to be a hardcover book. It can just be something online, anything that will, feed your brain and, to go towards your main objective and your main goals. So I thought I'd just throw that in because I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, that goes with the lifelong learning thing is that you do need to have that input, because that input, not only are you learning how to do what it is that you're trying to do, but it also means that you're giving your creativity raw material, and entrepreneurship is about creativity. Yes. I'm currently working on a blog series about what I call the 4 types of learning, and maybe I can outline that quickly because so this would be something fresh in your podcast. I've never actually, I don't think I put this idea out there yet, but
awesome. You heard it here first, folks.
You've probably heard pieces of this because we have talked about pieces of this, like just-in-time learning. But here's a few other details that go with that. The first type of learning I would say is discovery learning, and that was the mode that I was in after I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, because I didn't know what the path was. I just kind of knew vaguely what the outcome was. Like I needed to quit my job, needed my own path. I didn't know which direction to head. And so I needed to just fill my mind with whatever I could to discover the possibilities. I was posing a question, how do I get out? And I needed an answer to that question. And so I was looking for, that in all these different places. But like the moment that I had a good answer to that question, then I needed to transition out of discovery learning, because learning can always, again, become that excuse to not act. And so the reason I bring this up is I agree, daily learning is awesome, but know what type of learning is most appropriate for you in the moment. Because then at some point you got to switch to what's called just-in-time learning. And this is one we talk about a lot on our podcast. And that is like, okay, well, once you know the path, or if you do have a certain focus and you know what the most important next thing to do in your business or in your life is right now, or for whatever project, well, then now let's focus our learning on consuming stuff that has to do with that. It's kind of silly that we fill our inbox with 100 different email newsletters and our RSS feed with, a blog reader with 200 different blogs.
Guilty.
And we've got, 10 books sitting on our bedstand waiting to be read. And we're putting the cart before the horse, and we're learning about traffic before we even have a website, or, we're choosing a business model before we even really know what it is, what kind of lifestyle we want to create. And so, let's filter that stuff, and let's read the stuff. Let's follow the stuff. Let's focus on the stuff that we can actually put into action in the next 2 to 4 weeks. And that's what we call just-in-time learning. And all of a sudden you can let go of like 90% of the learning you feel like you got to just do right now, right? The third kind of learning, I would say, is free learning. And I think that entrepreneurs need to do this regularly. It doesn't have to have the purpose of just-in-time learning. It doesn't have to be focused. In fact, it shouldn't. The free learning, and I like to do this on a weekly basis if I can. Every day, I mean, if you can do it and be productive, I suppose that's fine. It definitely needs very confined limits, because it can go down a rabbit hole real quick. But this is where you are just on whatever whim, clicking around the internet, picking up whatever magazine off the shelf, grabbing whatever book, just filling your brain with whatever. And it doesn't matter if you're going to put it into action right now. It doesn't matter if it's, what you're doing is you're just filling your brain with that raw matter, because sometimes in doing that, an association comes out that you would have never thought of. And maybe all of a sudden something does apply to what you're doing right now. Or maybe it gives you this brilliant idea that normally, if all we do is always, just-in-time learning, getting stuff done, I only want to be efficient and effective and productive, well, then you miss some of those other opportunities that come from just like random strokes of genius, because, you're reading, like I was reading Psychology Today the other day, and that's not a business magazine, but all of a sudden I had this great idea that came to me because I was reading this psychology article, and that was just that was free learning. That was just me kind of following a whim to open that magazine.
Did you write it down, Jason?
I did write it down. Yep, I did write it down.
Good.
Yep. So that's the third kind. And then the fourth kind I would call research learning. And I'm still trying to decide the best name for it, but I call it research learning for now. This is different from discovery learning, because discovery learning is about, I don't know the path, I don't know what I'm trying, I'm just trying to find the right direction to head. It's different than just-in-time learning, though. It's kind of like that, but just-in-time learning is about taking action today and the next week and the next 2 weeks. And it's different than free learning, because free learning is just filling my brain on a whim. Research learning is the kind of learning that I do as a teacher, a podcaster, a content creator, a course creator. When I'm sitting down to make a module that's all about getting traffic from Twitter, I could. One of the things I do is I go out there and I do a little bit of research. I want to know, okay, well, what else has been said on this topic? How can I make mine different? What's missing? What can I do better in my way that I teach Twitter? And I have to limit that, because that can turn into a rabbit hole and procrastinate actually making the thing. But I'll give myself a window of time. It's like, look, for 30 minutes, I want to see what else is out there. I'm going to go see what the couple top books are, or the big what comes up in the top of Google when I search for this, and that might just kind of, and usually what that does, it just motivates me to push a little further, do something a little different, innovate, or come up with something better. And so that's what I call that research learning. And so again, that has specific time, specific purpose. But those are four kinds of learning that I think entrepreneurs need. But you got to know which one you're doing. You got to limit the time accordingly, and you got to know when to switch from one type of learning to another, or switch from learning mode into just take action mode. Because the worst thing you can do is procrastinate and not take action, because that's the kiss of death for an entrepreneur.
I do agree with you. Now, Jason, back in episode 1 with Jeremy, he had talked about his SMP, his single motivating purpose. And
Yes.
I wanted to ask you what your SMP is.
My single motivating purpose is I get up in the morning to share knowledge and resources that, in order to help other people live lives of increasing freedom, fulfillment, and purpose. Now, the way I do that right now, one application of that in my life is my business, because I help entrepreneurs. I give them the knowledge and resources they need to find increasing fulfillment and freedom and purpose in their lives by starting a business that brings them freedom, fulfillment, and purpose. So my business is one application of that, but it also shows up in other places in my life, in my parenting, and in the interactions with my friends. Like, this is the thing that I feel the most fulfilled. I think it's things that I can do just on an exceptional level. I'm very good at them. Things like teaching and sharing these things. And it's also where I feel like I can make my biggest impact in the world, is doing those kinds of things. So that's my single motivating purpose.
Nice. Now, I wanted everyone to know that you guys are doing tremendous work over at Internet Business Mastery. And I see that you guys, I actually listened to your newest podcast, and you guys are already at episode 213, which is just mind-blowing that you guys have that many episodes. And the one today that you guys released was a Twitter strategy that is authentic, effective, and efficient. Now, so basically my question is, where do you guys get the motivation to keep going on and keep doing more and more podcasts? Because 213 is huge. So obviously you guys are giving tons and tons of value and tons of content to all your listeners of the Internet Business Mastery podcast. Now, can you take us behind the scenes and just kind of tell everybody where the inspiration comes from to get things done for your podcast?
Well, it really comes back to that single motivating purpose, and that's why it's such an important thing that we help our students to discover that statement that sums up, where can they make the biggest impact in the world, and what is it that brings them the most fulfillment and energy in their life. Because if you find that, then you do have this intrinsic motivation. You feel driven to continually improve yourself in that area, to learn in that area. I mean, when I am doing my discovery learning, when I am doing my just-in-time learning, I feel compelled. It's like, oh my gosh, I get so excited. I got to share this with somebody. I got to go put it into action. I got to see the results. I can't wait. Every day I'm typing into Evernote ideas for blog posts or podcasts. And when you do find that audience that you're just thrilled to work with and deliver value to, when you find that single motivating purpose, that thing, I think there's endless improvement, endless desire to. I mean, studies show that what we are motivated. There's a great book. Okay, let me say this. A great book called Drive. You don't need to go read the book. Just Google for Dan Pink as the author's name, Dan Pink, and he's got a video called The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And it just compiles some amazing information in about 10 minutes about what motivates human beings. And we've previously, in decades past, thought it was all about punishment and reward. It's like you give them a paycheck, they'll do their work. If you, threaten to put them in timeout, they'll stop doing it. And while that's maybe effective in the immediate, it's not very effective in the long term. What's really effective is intrinsic motivation, which are things like autonomy, the ability to have control over my life and feel free to make my decisions and exercise my own will. Things like mastery, the drive and desire to better myself. And things like purpose, the desire to have meaning in life and to contribute to something larger, bigger than myself. And, so when you tap into those things that, it's different for everybody, that's apply in a different way for everybody. But for me, like I feel compelled to teach and share and help, and particularly I have an affinity for entrepreneurs and online influencers, and I love helping people get their voice out there and create something of meaning through business. So that's why 213 episodes in, and I can make 213 more, because I'm continually learning, I'm continually growing, I'm always hearing the next set of needs that somebody has, or a new way, a better way to teach something.
Right. And
I feel compelled every day to create and share those things. So it all comes back to understanding your single motivating purpose.
Awesome. You have so much knowledge to share with people. And I do want to mention to the audience that you guys can find Jeremy and Jason over at onlinebusinessera.com/IBM. That's short for Internet Business Mastery. If you don't mind, and I hope these guys don't mind, but I do want to share some of the superstars that you guys have produced, and one being Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income. What can you tell us about what your relationship is with Pat and how you guys were able to propel him, basically, propel him to superstardom, because he is obviously one of the go-to guys, I guess you could say, for affiliate marketing online right now.
Right. And I chuckle because, in many ways, obviously Pat propelled himself. There's no stopping the guy. Yeah. But I am happy to, and he'll tell you this too, to say that we played some part in him getting started. A lot of people know his story of being laid off, and then he had his little site about taking the lead exam that he discovered was getting all this traffic, and he's like, maybe I can make some money off of this. And so when he was laid off and he knew he had a limited amount of time before his work arrangement was going to end, when his paycheck would be cut off, one of the ways that he gave himself hope and passed the time on that train going to a job that was all but gone, all but dead, was to listen to podcasts, and ours was one of them. Because he's trying to see what else could I possibly do. And so this would be like 2008, he listened to the podcast. He joined our academy, which still goes to this day. It's our A to Z training of getting started in business. And he was very active in our community. I can still picture the avatar, his smiling avatar face that he used back then inside of our forums. And he just happened to live, Jeremy shortly after that just happened to move to San Diego, where Pat lives. And so when Jeremy got down there, he wanted to connect with people who were listeners and students, and Pat was one of them he got together with, and they formed a little mastermind. And there was Pat Flynn was in there, and there was also Dan Andrews of Lifestyle Business Podcast was part of that at the time. Mm-hmm. He's also somebody who's a listener, and he talks about listening to our show and going, man, if these guys can do it, I can do it, and taking off to travel and figure things out, and he's done really well for himself too. So Pat and Dan were in that mastermind, and Jeremy was giving coaching Pat a bit at that time, telling him like, okay, well, here's what I think you need an ebook on your site. And okay, now I think you need it, and all of a sudden he's making, instead of $25 on his ads, he's making $8,000 that first month. He has an ebook, and then Jeremy's like, well, I think you need an audio version. And the next thing you know, he has I think it's like a $30,000 a month because he's selling the audio version now too. So, so that's, some of that early relationship with him. And then for a time, he also came and actually worked with us on traffic and stuff. Like, we brought him in under an arrangement to kind of be our traffic guy for a while, and we handed him all these traffic courses, and he was going through them and giving us all this great, like, hey, I think you guys should do this, and I think you should do that, and I think you should do this. And he was very enthusiastic, as Pat can be. And at the time, we were caught up in so much stuff we were trying to do. I think maybe there's a couple of things that he was recommending that we did. And at some point, he's just like, fine, I'm starting my own site, and I'm going to start doing some of this traffic stuff. Nice. Shortly thereafter, he started Smart Passive Income, and that started growing, and he's like, I think I need a podcast on this thing. And I remember Skyping with him about that and giving him some pointers on how to get that going. And then at some point I connected him with Cliff Ravenscraft, who then hooked him up with a bunch of gear and taught him some more stuff about podcasting. And so then he launched his show. And as he says, like, that made a huge difference in his brand once he had his podcast. And so those are some of the places where we have associated and maybe had a small part to play in his progress, but awesome. There's so much stuff Pat's a great example of just what it is to be determined and unstoppable and want to create value for people and do good in the world, and you help other people get what they want, and in the end you end up getting what you want too. So he's a good friend, and definitely somebody I look up to myself now. I love the fact that now I turn to him for ideas and input about business as well.
So I definitely see a trend here with everybody that we've talked about, including Pat Flynn and even you guys over at Internet Business Mastery. And that is, number one, just to take action. I think when people start taking action, good things happen, just like you talked about.
Yeah.
And even for myself, when I started online, don't want to get into it too much, but there was, like you talked about, your email inbox. You start subscribing to all these different places. You start getting all this information. And the only thing I did in the beginning was read and contemplate which blog was the one that was telling me the truth and which one was the one that I was going to trust in order to help me propel my business online. And it took a lot of time away from the important part, which was actually doing the work,
right?
So can you talk about what the Academy offers and what the Academy can offer to people that are either A, just starting out, or B, they've already got something online, but they want to take it to that next level and become more successful online?
Sure. Well, we talked some earlier about what people need in order to succeed and some of the characteristics and behaviors and things like that. And we've worked with a lot of new entrepreneurs. Over 5,000 people have gone through our courses and training and coaching to learn how to start a new business. So in 10 years now of working with and consulting people on marketing and business and entrepreneurship, we've arrived at what is now the third iteration of our academy, which is our flagship, step-by-step training of here's how to go from not knowing an idea at all of what your business is going to be to launching a business online that's making you money. And so we've pulled together the kinds of resources and found out, like, what is it that people need so they will be more likely to stick with it. I mean, it's hard enough to do all the other things we have in our life going on every day, all the things demanding our attention, let alone to try and learn how to start a business and run a business. So how can we make that as easy as possible for people and hopefully shortcut the process, help them avoid many of the pitfalls that we've gone through in the past. And so we've created not only a set of training, but it's also a community, because I think it's very important not to feel alone in this journey, to associate with other people, to surround yourself with success, as we like to say, meaning to have friends who are aspiring to similar things, even if these are virtual friends online, to find yourself associating regularly with people who can give you encouragement, insight, feedback that you're helping as well. And so we've got a very active group of students online that are constantly helping each other out, inspiring each other, answering each other's questions. We go in there as well. It's an online mastermind is what we call it, and it's through Facebook. So it's online training, video, audio. It's the community. It's very step by step. We've looked around. We've been through a lot of the courses out there. Just not only just us learning how to do this, but also because of wanting to see what's missing in entrepreneurial education. And so often you'll start a course, you'll be going along, and then all of a sudden there's just this big hole where they're like, oh, go do this, and they just kind of assume that you know how. And so then all of a sudden there's this gap. And so we put a large focus on being very, very step by step. And in fact, the way our course material is laid out is such that it's literally checkboxes on the screen or on your mobile phone. And so it's okay, listen to this. Okay, now go do this. Okay, now you need to, print this out and do this exercise and think this through. Okay, now, go sign up for this free account over here. Okay, now do this. So it's at any given moment, you know what to do next. Because that's one of the biggest things that overwhelm people is they say, I just don't know what the next step is. Or if they have very limited time and they sit down and they got to spend, they've got 30 minutes to work on their business and they have to spend 10 or 15 of those minutes just trying to remember where they were at or what they need to do. It's we want people to have momentum. It's so important to have momentum and to keep moving forward. And I love the fact that people, especially with this new version of our academy, have said, it's almost hard for me not to take action because the next checkbox makes it so easy. And we have this progress tracking. They're that's always just enticing me to go a little bit further. And so we've tried to put together this ultimate resource that gives people every excuse to succeed and removes all the excuses to not progress.
That's
and
great.
we feel just like it's absolutely the best internet business training that you can find out there, because it's gone through 5,000 people going through it, and us 8 to 10 years of teaching this stuff online, and we've made several different versions, and I don't know anybody teaching this that's been around teaching it as long as we have, because a lot of the people we learned from way back when, they're actually not online teaching this stuff anymore. They've moved on to other businesses and ideas and things, and so a few years is like decades on the internet, and so to have somebody stick to it's because it's a mission for us, and to have somebody stick to teaching entrepreneurs for 8 years of a podcast and 8 years of coaching people who listen to that podcast, it's I think that means something and has led to something that we're very proud of.
No, that's great, and I really, really do love the online mastermind group that you guys have put together for Academy members. It just holds people to accountability, and you have this connection with other entrepreneurs, and you can ask questions, and you're not alone, like you said, right? So I really, really, that's something that everyone should be a part of always on their journey online is some sort of mastermind group, because if you're alone and you're starting off, it's very easy to sway and be told by friends, for example, that you're never going to make it because this is just a fad or whatever the excuses are, right? I'm not a fan of people telling me or anybody that is online that this thing is not real and there's no money to be made, or it's just excuse after excuse, and I'm not a fan of the people that say that, because they're the same ones that haven't actually tried to go online. And you got to learn to not listen to those naysayers, and everything they're saying, it's more about them than it is about you, and it's in our nature. When somebody starts leaving the herd, to start making noise, we don't want them to leave the herd. We want them to come back and be like everybody else. So you got to find a new herd. That's what you got to do. Now, Jason, I also wanted to touch base on outsourcing. Are you guys big fans of outsourcing your work over at IBM?
Absolutely. I mean, I guess that word outsourcing has come to mean all kinds of different things. What I'm a big fan of is focusing your time and attention on what you do best, and then building a team and systems to take care of everything else. And that's not going to all happen at once. We've worked long and hard to get our business to the point where I get to spend the bulk of my days doing things like relating with my students and doing interviews like this, and creating new content and reading and learning and strategizing new ideas. And that's all the stuff I love, and thankfully doing less and less of things like worrying about keeping the books up or accounting and paying the bills and stuff that's just not my strengths, that I'm not good at, and we pay other people to do that. So in that sense, yeah, I mean, I'm all about outsourcing, and that could be everything from putting together an automated system that takes care of it to hiring a freelancer. We have a bookkeeper, and every month she spends a few hours putting our books together, and so we don't have to think about it, and she does it way better than we would ever do it. To hiring full-time team members. I think it's very important to have a team of freelancers and at some point employees. We currently have a good handful of different freelancers that do stuff for us, but we currently have 3 full-time employees. And it just so happens that all of our employees are offshore, meaning they're foreign, abroad in other countries, and ours are all in the Philippines. And the reason for that is because you can get very, very talented people and offer them a job that they love because it's flexible and it pays well for them. But because of the conversion rate of currency and just the way the global economy works, it's very inexpensive for us to hire these people full time. We wouldn't be, it'd be very different. We can get a full time, customer service guy for just a few $100s a month, and that supports his family. And some people might go, how does anybody live off of $400? Well, when you convert it to Filipino pesos, it's an absolutely livable wage. Like he feeds his family and pays his bills off of that. Up to programmers that you can hire for several $100s a month versus, obviously in the U.S. you would have to pay 50, 60, 100,000, 150,000 depending on how good what level of programming that they do, and that's just not feasible for some businesses. And that can be a very loaded topic, and I completely understand why. But I'm a big fan of those things because I feel it's my duty to grow my business and succeed. And for me, it's not like it's a choice of hiring here in the U.S. versus hiring there. It's a choice of, do I hire over there or do I not, have the money to grow my business, period. And obviously, the more that my business thrives, not only is that good for me and my family and those around me, but we're also creating new entrepreneurs and new businesses through the people that we teach, and giving jobs to our employees there in the Philippines as well. So I'm a huge fan of it.
Great stuff. Now, let me ask you this: for the upcoming years and what you guys at the Academy are experiencing, what do you think some of the trends are that are coming in the foreseeable future or in the coming years? Do you think that more people, I think there is evidence, and I know there is evidence, that more people are getting online on their mobile phones and tablets more and more, rather than their desktops. Is that something that you guys are gearing towards? Like, does the
Absolutely.
Academy also include training, in terms of mobile phones and tablets?
Well, in terms of, so yes, mobile is a growing trend, and any business would be wise to think about how to incorporate that trend and amplify their business through mobile trends. Like how we've done that is we've made our courses mobile friendly. You can go through the Academy training on an iPhone, and we have students who do. We made sure that we provided for that. In terms of, do we teach mobile, we've had mobile experts come on our podcast and guest blog for us. The Academy training tends to be like the foundational stuff of, we teach we teach social media, and certainly that's, mobile to a degree. As far as like specifically mobile course, we don't have a course right now that focuses on mobile, though I can see us teaching that in the very near future to our more intermediate level students. I mean, somebody who hasn't got a business online and cash flowing, I don't know that they should stress themselves out as to whether or not they're mobile friendly or not. They should just concentrate on creating value for a specific audience and getting to that first sale is what they should do. But yeah, mobile is a trend and is something to be considered. Absolutely.
Awesome. Now, Jason, I want to thank you again for being on the Online Business Era podcast with us today. Now, before we let you go, do you have any final thoughts and something that you can share with people that are listening that might be looking for that spark to get online, or maybe even just business owners, small business owners that don't have an online presence? What do you have to say to those groups of people?
Yeah, just figure out that next action that you can do. Get started, whatever it is. Something we say a lot is progress, not perfection. We get really locked up thinking that we got to figure out what the next perfect step is, and you don't need to take the next perfect step. You just need to take the next step and then take another one and be very consistent at taking steps. And don't hold yourself to this idea of like, oh, well, I got to have it all figured out before you start, because the truth is some of it you can't figure out until you do get started. And so that's the thing you got to do, is just get started, take the next step. And put yourself out there. Good things will start happening.
Just do it. All right, yeah. Perfect. Jason, thank you again for being on the show today. And are you going to be at New Media Expo in January?
Absolutely. I'll be there.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks again, Jason. And for anybody that is listening, I want you to go over to onlinebusinessera.com/episode 5. And that's where you're going to find all the show notes for this podcast. And we'll see you on the flip side and see you on the next episode. Thank you again for tuning into the Online Business Era podcast. It's been a real pleasure to have Jason Van Orden on this episode number 5. Please head over to onlinebusinessera.com and sign up for my newsletter, and I will send you powerful information that will help you build and maintain your online presence and online business. Thank you again, and I'll see you on the next episode.